Today, we're looking at a purple ink from Sailor L'Amant. Because obviously, this is an ink born in a junkyard. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you're only interested in certain parts, you can skip around. But if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram. And if you're new here and like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Tasha Spectrum with a music nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take my notes for this video. I used 3 papers to standardize in some of my writing samples: Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. There are additional writing samples that'll come later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading throughout. When you look at Sailor, it starts mid, gets dark, gets mid again. In L'Amant, it gets very dark at the beginning of the A. Extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, still some very nice shading. Brown starts darker, gets lighter. Quick started lighter, got very dark at the K. Some nice subtle shading going on here. 7 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen. Same shading we're getting in the extra fine and the stub. Like quick, K is a very dark. The is a very dark word, especially next to over that starts light and gets dark. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show us some color variation far left to far right, and we do get that in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 10 seconds to dry. The medium is a little bit darker than we got with the extra fine or stub. It had no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation, and we didn't get any on this paper. Rhodia has no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading, not as much as the Clairfontaine, but it's definitely there. Look at quick, starts lighter, gets darker at the K. Over starts lighter, darker at the R. The is a darker word than what's right around it. 7 seconds to dry. The medium is about the same tone that we got with the extra fine and the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some shading throughout. Like quick starts darker, gets lighter, and gets darker. Brown starts darker and gets lighter. The is a very dark word. Over starts light and gets dark. 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us some color variation, and we do get it in the writing. I agree with Vita that we learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this purple that starts light for being watered down at the water, and it's pushing its way much darker at the top. But at the very top, we see a line of a bright blue. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that blue that we saw at the top of the first chromatography is definitely mostly sticking around at the bottom of this chromatography, showing that we expect that blue to be a little bit more resistant. A lot of the purple hasn't really pushed its way up. A lot of it seems to have stayed down because it's not nearly as dark at the top as the original one. And again at the very top, we see that faint line of a very light blue. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, there is a bunch of ink that moves around with this. However, it's very readable still. It's not a problem. It'll be a little bit of a messy notebook, but you could use this in a note-taking situation. water is starting to really break up this ink. We start to see on the right upper side a little bit of the white of the paper coming through. If it's not enough to get this ink out of your pen, then Pen Flush will definitely do it, because we easily see that with only 30 seconds, it's really starting to break up the ink that's there, and we're starting to easily see the white of the paper. The 1/3 bleach solution, which you're not going to need to get out of your pen, was strange. It's really starting to remove it, but it turned this ink a sort of green color on the page. So while we see areas that the white of the paper is coming through, that's interesting that we're starting to get this green that's nowhere in the chromatography. I test viscosity or flow by using a tilt test that I've linked in this video. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Sailor's L'Amant has a viscosity of 1.52, making this a very wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and what I found is the average dry time is 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Sailor's L'Amant has an average dry time of 9 seconds, making this a pretty fast drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Sailor's L'Amant, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I wanted to go with a nice orange, and I chose Krishna's Palasa. The second writing sample is done on white lines, P. Berger, and black and red notebooks. Here we're looking at black and red notebooks. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine looks slightly darker, just a tad bit darker, than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 5 seconds to dry. Medium is a slight bit darker again than the extra fine, quite a bit darker than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both, if you look far left to far right, does show a little bit of color variation, although we're not getting it in the writing. P. Berger, it's a French rule student grade paper. It has a lot of bleeding, a lot of ghosting. It does not touch the page underneath, so while you can't use the back of the page, you're not ruining the next one. The 1.1 has plenty of tiny feathers all over it, but not so distracting that if this is what you were using, it was lost to not really being able to read it. Just a lot of tiny feathering. No spread, halo, sheen, no shade. The extra fine is tiny bit darker than the stub. It had no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 3 seconds to dry. It performed the best when it came to the bleeding and the ghosting, although I still don't think you could use the back of the page. The medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine. There is some feathering that's occurring on there, like if you look at the word the, especially through the T, you see a bunch of feathering there. You look at the word the here, has a ton of tiny feathers all over it. The B in brown has some feathers, but again, it's not going to stop you from really using it. It's just really there. No spread, halo sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any in the writing. Last up is white lines, which we've found a lot of inks that work very well with this, and this is not one of them. Although the extra fine did much better than the medium did, you can't use the back of the page here. You might, depending on you, be able to use the back for the extra fine, and not the stub. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. The medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine. It does have tiny feathers, smaller feathers than we had with the P. Berger, but there's a little bit there, like the word lazy has it all over. The word quick has it all over. But the word brown came out generally fine. 5 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine is showing some color variation even though we didn't get any. The medium shows none, and we got none. And that is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Sailor L'Amant? There's a lot of color variation you can get depending on what pen and nib you choose to write with. Now, I really do like its solid tones that you can get, and I really do like when you get the shading from this ink. This is a winner all around, no matter what you choose. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience? While a very wet pen is going to put down a beautiful purple for you to look at, I found a medium flow, medium nib pen was most enjoyable for me to be able to get a hold of some nice shading. If you've enjoyed this video and made it this far, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and tell me why. Thanks for watching.